No,
Um,
you're right.
we touched, you touched on my wife. And both of our wives were in education. Um, Tell me about your best experience that you've had going out and doing writers conferences for kids, because I know you do that. That's a fun
Yeah.
thing for you.
Um, I think probably the best experience is getting the youth and even the teachers, the Bush teachers out in the community, getting them to realize that if they can tell a story, they can write a story. Because putting those words down on paper is very daunting. And I'm not one to say that everyone can write a novel.
Mhm.
Not everyone can be a brain surgeon. Not everyone can be a nuclear physicist. But I think a lot of people can, and they don't think they can. And so going out to Bush, Alaska and getting youth to tell me their stories and then letting them understand, hey, you've got a good way of spinning a yarn here. Why don't you write that down? And watching that aha light go off in their head, like, I could do that. It's really neat for me to see that dawn in their eyes.
One of the reasons I brought it up is that one of the great trips of my life was last year. Carmen and I went out to probably the most remote place in America that has a school. We got in a helicopter in Nome and flew for an hour and a half out to Little Diomede Island and
Wow.
did a writers conference for 13 kids out there.
Mhm.
Uh, Yupik Eskimo kids, so reserved, so nervous. It took an hour and a half of just coaching just to get them to start to even talk to us.
Mhm.
Once they accepted us, though, we began. The very first thing they said, "Well, we have nothing to write about." So we started to talk about our stories at home, and pretty soon one kid would come up with a story. My Diomede Island is an amazing place. I mean, there is nothing more remote in America. You wake up every morning and watch sunrise tomorrow in Russia, 10 miles away. And the lifestyle there is truly one of hunting, fishing, subsistence lifestyle. And but these kids have just extraordinary stories. They're just stories that any place else in the world would be considered just super fiction. I mean, you couldn't possibly be doing those things. Chasing polar bears down, on snowshoes after somebody inadvertently wounds one instead of kill it, and across the open leads in the straits. Um, I love that experience, but every time I get to go, I walk out with more story ideas than I took with me when I went in.
No,
Um,
I think I think you really hit on a key point as a writer. I tell people every time that I speak at a conference or class or high school or whatever, we as writers are like mollusks. We're straining the world for all those little bits and pieces of story and, you know, life experience and whatever that a lot of people kind of rock on and don't observe because they're in their iPhones or playing a game or whatever. Kids out in the bush, especially, I grew up very poor. Poor kids, I think, really observe because they don't have the other things to take their mind off of the world. But so they have stories, but like you say, when I go out, um, man, I come away with so many little tidbits of information that I never would have known otherwise. I think teaching is great, and I hope that we, like the trip that you took or the trips that I take, we can give something back. But boy, it's really slanted in our favor as
Absolutely.
yeah.
Um, that gets me to another question. That when you sit down to start a story, are you writing from experience or imagination?
Yes. No, I think and I've read some of your work too, and I think
Yeah.
you do the same thing. Experience sparks the story, but then, my stories we sold a pilot script to Amazon a couple of years ago, and it's never been made, but we sold it. But one of the questions they ask you is this based on real people? And so I had to really look at my writing and say, no, it's not. It's inspired by real people. It's inspired by real events, but it's not based on anyone real. And so I think with my writing, as I suspect yours is, I'm sparked by my own experience, whether it's flying or arresting someone or some hellacious fight or it's imagination that's the story.
When when you were writing your original series, your Jericho Quinn series, um, you transitioned from that into writing Tom Clancy novels.
Mhm.
And was that a good experience for you, other than the financial part?
It was very good. It was difficult and it was heart pounding and nerve wracking, but I had a phenomenal editor named um, Tom Colgan with Putnam / Penguin Random House. Um, and it came out of the blue. It's not something that you try for. They just read, Mark Graney, who was doing it before, recommended me, and that's how I got the gig. I had no idea it was coming, so it was very much a surprise. Um, but it also it's a finite thing. I couldn't keep doing it forever because they're not my characters. So after you write 6 or 7 of those, you kind of you kind of run what you can do with those characters without making them grow. And it's not our job to make Jack Ryan grow. He's Tom Clancy's guy.
Yeah.
So no, it was a great experience, but I wanted to write my own stuff. So I did the same thing Mark did, and after 7 books, stepped away to kind of bet on myself. But it was fantastic.
And do you has that helped you? Because as you transition into your Arliss Cutter series, which I love, what's not to love? I mean, it's about Alaska, but when you made that transition, did it really help you bring a lot of those readers with you?
I excuse me, I think it did. I mean the Jericho Quinns were already New York Times bestsellers. So
Yeah.
I had a readership, but but there's no doubt that Clancy opens doors. Yeah, I was just going to say that Clancy certainly opens doors, and it makes the research easier. As far as I can call the Pentagon and say, hey, tell me about Operation Noble Eagle, and they'll put me in with touch with the retired general that wrote the SOP, because I wrote some Tom Clancy's. But um, the Arlists were coming on board when I got the call. And so the transition, the worst thing about writing the Clancy's, I had to go 10 years without writing a Jericho. And so I'm one of the reasons that I stepped away is just because I wanted to get back. I don't want to lose the readers from the Jericho Quinn novels. So working on the first one of those in 9 years right now.
Well, one of the reasons I ask is Tom Clancy and Clive Cussler both were real influencers for me when I made the transition from doing political writing into writing novels. I love especially their early work. The creativity and the innovation, the technology, the way they work technology into their stories, I thought was really amazing. Um, the one thing that I struggle with, and you've already touched on that, is you get one superhero, and after about the 7th or 8th book, that from the very beginning who's going to win the war, and not only that they're going to win the war, but pretty much how they're going to win the war. Um, and it's been one of the things that I've really tried to emphasize in my books is each book is very different. The team that gets put together is very different.
Hmm.
But I'm not. I one time was, but I'm no longer a real superhero fan. Um, Maybe that's because I've only known one or two in my life, and that's only because of the history books and they were dead. Um, Putting up everything they had, life on the line in impossible situations. They may have succeeded, but very few of them survived that. So um, it's not. After a while, it just became a little incredible to me. But I still love the work.